A very welcome to all of you for the Women Leica Summit. Thanks a lot for joining. I am Karin Rein-Kaufmann, Art Director and Chief Representative of the Leica Galleries International. In 1914, the first idea of the Leica camera was born. The first idea of a compact, portable film camera invented by Oskar Barnack. With this Leica camera, Oskar Barnack revolutionized the whole world of photography. The camera, with its timeless, wonderful design and the extraordinary lenses, changed the view on photography. It matured a new kind of culture photography, a new kind of storytelling, and of course, reportage was possible. Since then, Leica stood and still stands for a very special visual culture. Photography has always been at the forefront of all our thought and actions. Leica shares a love and a passion for cultural photography and quality with many people around the world. Photography is capturing a moment in time and transporting it into something timeless. In 1980, we founded the Leica Oskar Barnack Award. Since then, we have the same theme: the relationship of humanity to its environment. And as we all know, this theme gets more and more relevant and important each year. We have a lot of well-known winners like Sebastião Salgado, Jane Evelyn Atwood, Jan Grarup, Thomas Monita, and so on. Beside our Leica Oskar Barnack Award, we as well have our Leica Hall of Fame Award. With this prize, we honor outstanding photographers for their life work. Photographers whose views on the world has an impact on all of us. Iconic images that have branded themselves on our collective memory. One of the first one who won the Leica Hall of Fame Award was my wonderful Steve McCarry. And I'm so glad and honored that I'm here now, standing in the fresh and wonderful exhibition of Steve, The Eyes of Humanity, in the Ernst Leitz Museum in Wetzlar. This is not a joke. We really have an own museum here at Leica headquarters. But we not only have a museum here, we have a wonderful hotel. Of course, we have part of our production here. We have an Ernst Leitz Café. We have an academy here. We have a huge Leica gallery, and so on and so on. So if you ever have the chance to be in Germany, don't miss this hotspot of photography. You can experience here on so many different levels the whole world of photography. For decades, Leica has offered both prominent photographers as well as emergent talents the opportunity to present their work to a wider audience. The Leica Galleries here has been the ideal forum for this purpose. The tradition of the Leica Galleries goes back to the 1970s. When I was involved in the Leica culture and the Leica culture heritage in about 2006, we had 4 Leica galleries. Today, we look proudly on a well-established and prestigious network of 25 Leica galleries around the world. Galleries that offer a wide range of artists a platform to exhibit their work and to tell their moving stories. To take care of photography, of our photographers, of the Leica culture heritage is an essential part of our corporate philosophy and all our activities. Therefore, we as well founded this wonderful Leica Women Award in the US. And thanks a lot for your great engagement and support, dear Kiran. It's important also to focus on women photography, to experience their different perspective and their different views on the world. So I wish you all an interesting, wonderful Leica Women Summit. Thanks for joining, and perhaps when hopefully soon traveling is possible, we will meet here at Leica headquarters. Take care and bye-bye.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Anatomy of a Photo Business, our concluding program at our first ever annual Leica Women Summit. I'm Yvette Trin of Leica Camera, and I'm so glad that you could join us for the special event where we connect photographers and visionaries like yourself while helping you unlock new opportunities too. Today, I'm honored to introduce curator Julie Grahame and photographer Janette Beckman to discuss the art, culture, and commerce of photography. For any questions to our speakers, be sure to drop them into the Q&A feature, and we'll try our best to get through all of them in this program. With that, Julie and Janette, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Yvette. Thank you, everybody at Leica. You've been wonderful to work with. You're hosting an amazing program this weekend. Janette and I are thrilled to be a part of it. We've been thrilled to watch some of the other programming as well. And we have to also give big thanks to Laura Romanos, all the people at Photoville who we're very close with and who invited us to be here today. We wanted to kick off just with a quick explanation of how we met. Janette and I are both from London. We met here in New York in the early 1990s when I came here to run a big photo agency that was essentially specializing in celebrities and music pictures. And I knew Janette's work, and I really wanted to poach her away from the agency that she was currently with. So I schmoozed a friend of hers who was a photographer, and I managed to bring her over from the other company. Very quickly, Janette invited me into her archive, which was pretty substantial at that point already, and let me basically ruffle around in there, pull out work. We started working together then, and we've been working together ever since on various projects, conversations, curating, fundraising, so on and so forth.
Yeah. Hi, everybody.
Let's get our first slide up. Am I not seeing? There we go. Lovely.
There you go.
Okay, so this is Janette's current incarnation of her logo, which is some pretty wonderful branding. This was made for Janette by a well-known artist named Say Adams, who we'll be talking to a little bit later. So let's kick off with the beginning of Janette's career. JB.
Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us. This is really exciting, and thank you so much to Leica and, of course, Photoville for asking. So I grew up in London, and I went to college. And this is a picture of Susie and the Banshees that I took after I came out of college. I had never photographed a band before, and I walked into a music paper because I was really into music with my portfolio, which really didn't have no music pictures, just a few portraits. And for some reason, the editor liked me, and she said, "What are you doing tonight? Why don't you go and photograph Susie and the Banshees?" So on the spot with my nickel matte camera, out how to photograph a live band in situ. Oops, excuse me. I thought I had this turned off. Sorry about that. Yeah, this is what happened. I photographed Susie. I developed the film that night in my little dark room, and I came back to the music paper the very next day with the pictures, and they loved them. And that led to another assignment 2 days later, and I ended up shooting 2 to 3 bands a week for music papers in London.
So you had just walked in off the street into the music paper, into the photo editor's office with a portfolio of work that didn't really have any music pictures in it, but was obviously solid enough for them to take a risk and throw you out into a gig where you didn't really know what you were doing. And to be fair, you got a pretty great shot of Susie Sue. So you're shooting bands very regularly.
Absolutely. I was shooting bands regularly, and I soon built up this portfolio of work of bands that I shot. So I was shooting bands like the Sex Pistols, the Clash, you know, a lot of famous bands of the time. And I started to take my portfolio of musicians around to record companies. And you could phone up the art department and make an appointment. So I made an appointment to A&M Records and went in. And they're like, oh, yeah, okay, do you want to shoot this unknown band? This is their first album. They're called The Police. It's a punk band. And nobody knew who The Police were at the time. And I was like, sure, I was very excited. And here's the first, my first album cover. And it was their first photo session together as well. So it was pretty exciting. And we never had assistants, hair, makeup. It was just me and the art director who was holding the light. We were in a tunnel in South London by Waterloo.
But you had to style that yourself. There's a great little backstory on that.
Yeah, we didn't have a stylist, and we decided that everybody would be wearing American parachute suits. And I'd just been to New York with my mom, and I'd had an American parachute suit. Andy didn't have one. He's the smallest guy in the band. So mine fit him. So he is actually wearing my parachute suit, which I did get back from him.
This was your first album cover. Tell us what happened when you saw this in LA.
What was so crazy, you know, I probably got to sign a contract, and honestly, I don't remember, but you know, like about 6 months later, I went to visit a friend in LA, and she picked me up from the airport, and we're driving down Sunset. And there's a huge record store there called Tower, or there was. And we're driving down Sunset, and I see my photo on a giant billboard lit above Tower Records. And I was like, wow, I've made it. This is so exciting. And I go into Tower Records, and there's all this merch. There's T-shirts, you know, bubble gum, there's like pillowcases, everything has my photo on it. And I had no idea this was going to happen. I was super excited. And to be honest, it's only, you know, years later that I realized that I probably shouldn't have gotten paid for all of that usage. Calendars, everything, you name it, it had Sting's face on it. So, you know, but
probably these days, you know, you probably would have a contract that would buy out the rights in all the images, and you would end up being faced with having to include all those rights. But perhaps in hindsight, it might have been something that you would have negotiated. But the stories I've heard from, you know, the music industry in the 80s, it just was much more airy-fairy, loosey-goosey. Did you end up with the rights to put those images in your archive and use them yourself, or not?
I did. And right now someone's making a documentary about A&M, and they want to see all my contact sheets, which I still have. So I'll be able to sell those to these documentary makers. And yeah, I mean, we didn't really have contracts back in the day. We didn't know about things like that.
But you certainly have them now. And just to speak to that to a point is, you know, be careful what you're agreeing to, because generally photographers only have the copyright in the image, and they don't have the personality rights in the image, and the contract you're presented with is going to make you liable for all kinds of stuff. So always check the contracts that you're agreeing to and signing. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the early images from your time in the UK before you moved to New York. This has become one of your more iconic images, I think. Tell us a bit about this beautiful girl.
This beautiful girl was at a youth club. I was teaching photography in my spare time when I wasn't taking pictures of bands or on the road. I was teaching photography in a youth club in South London. And the kids there were mods. And so I brought my camera one day and took a bunch of pictures. I got a picture of this beautiful girl. And just very recently, because I'm working on a book now, I wanted to find out her name. So I put this up on social media, on Instagram and Facebook. And a couple of the other guys that were at the youth club, other mods, were like, yeah, I think we know who that is. I think it's Linda. And so that was really exciting. They reached out to me and I'm back in touch with them. And, you know, it's sort of amazing all these years later to be in touch with these people who are by now in their 50s and have kids of their own. But I'm still trying to find out exactly where this beautiful girl is. She doesn't appear to be on social media yet.
That's great. I just wanted to throw in this picture here, which was one of the first, I think if not the first thing that I put my hands on when Janette let me into her archive and literally opened like a banker's box, pull out a sleeve of slides. And this is Nick Hayward from Haircut 100. Probably most of you don't know who it is. Just briefly, I wanted to show it because it makes me laugh, but also I think Janette took this picture and she wanted to have him lying on a bed because she knew that all the girly fans like me would love it and that there would be future use in that session, which I think is really interesting because in hindsight, that made a lot of sense and perhaps not a lot of people would have thought about that. But I love the way you tied that into the kind of how much people loved him. This definitely one of your most iconic photographs. This is Paul Weller and Pete Townsend. Tell us just briefly about this photograph.
This was going to be for the cover of Melody Maker, which was the music.
I think we may have lost JB. Okay, sorry everybody. Do we have a frozen Janette?
Frozen.
Oh, you're back. Great.
Okay, so I had scouted the exact spot where I thought we should take this picture and have them meet me there, which was outside this club called the Marquee, which both of them had played at. It's a very famous music club in Soho. And there's what makes it even greater as a picture is not only what Paul Weller is wearing, the styling, he's got these lokes on and he looks super put together, very mod. And then, you know, Townsend is a bit older and he doesn't care. He's just wearing a raincoat and some jeans. He doesn't care. But there's a Son of Stiff poster in the background. And I actually went on that music tour as well. It's kind of a moment in time. And a lot of people really love this. It became one of my more famous images.
I mean, I've seen people look at this, you know, in a large print and recognize the fashion. And, you know, I've seen, I think someone even from the shoe designer who was interested in the image. So I think there's an element of having your archive, but also knowing what's in there. You know, you've got Weller Townsend, but you also know that they're wearing a trench and you also know that this one's wearing this particular shoe and so on and so forth. So you already developed this amazing archive. Tell us about this picture and why it was a segue in your career.
This was like an amazing Renaissance moment for me. I was working for Melody Maker and the first ever hip hop tour to come to Europe was coming to London. And I put my hand up in the meeting, said, I want to go shoot this. We didn't know what it was. And I had gone in the afternoon to the hotel and taken pictures of all these amazing looking people that looked really different from the punks that I was used to. And then I went to the concert at night. And in this picture, I didn't know who these people were, but I kept shooting. In this picture is Dondi White, one of the most famous graffiti artists, Rammelsy, both unfortunately deceased, but super famous in the culture, Fab Five Freddy, and Africa Bambaataa. And I only found out who these people were much, much later when I came to do this mashup project, which we're going to talk about a little later. But it was so exciting to me to see rappers, breakdancers, DJs, and graffiti artists all on stage at the same time. So a couple of months later, I went to New York and it was all happening all around me. And I kind of ended up living in New York City ever since.
So you moved to New York and you were careful to maintain the relationships that you developed in the UK. And in the UK, all the magazines and papers and record companies that you were working for by now know that you can be trusted and actually you can be sort of chucked into any scenario, make a very quick connection with the person that you're photographing, which is a skill, obviously, that's very important if you only have a few minutes maybe to make a portrait with somebody. your consistent aesthetic, I think, is what sings throughout everything that you've done and the different sorts of work that we're going to look at today. So you've got some assignments already in New York, and you're here. And slide, please. We're getting to see shoots like this. So you haven't been in New York very long, and you're just this, like, you know, white kid from North London, going out on assignments like this. Tell us just a little bit about this shoot.
This shoot was amazing. It was for an incredible magazine called The Face. It was really a groundbreaking magazine out of the UK, and they were always ahead as far as music and style. And I'd been working for them. I worked for them in the very first issue in London. And this is a picture of Run DMC and their friends in Hollis, Queens, on the street that they live on. And we didn't have cell phones or anything back in the day. So I got a phone number, which turned out to be Jam Master Jay's mom's house. I call up, I talk to Jay, and I just went to Hollis. And I just thought, I'd been to the Bronx. I didn't know if Hollis was going to look more like the Bronx, which was pretty destroyed at the time, but it turned out to be this beautiful kind of sunlit street. And this is where they grew up. And it's also, to me, a moment in time, and the fashion, what they're wearing, their style, their attitude is so important. I mean, in this shoot, you can see Kangol, Gazelles, Adidas. Adidas had this as a big picture in their flagship store in Soho for many years, and it's actually hanging at a famous restaurant in Harlem called The Rooster right now. I mean, it means a lot to people now. That's all I have to say, not only because of it being Run DMC, but because of what they're wearing and who they are. And the other thing I have to say about this is always come camera ready, like I had back in the day, filming my camera. And they looked exactly like this, only, you know, they were all standing together when I arrived. And I just said, okay, this looks great. They crouched down, I took the picture. Maybe I took 40 shots at the most because it was film. And that was it. And I knew when I took this picture that it was going to be good.
I mean, and I think that's the other thing. You're always prepared to, you know, for what, if they'd been on top of the car, you'd have been just as prepared. But I think there's something in this image, which is obvious, that you've sort of disarmed the people that you're photographing somehow and creating this really cool shot, which also has resonated through time. And, you know, social media, the slow sort of development of your online presence, you know, it was pushed you quite hard to start a blog several years ago. You've had a couple of different incarnations of your website, which we'll talk about too. But social media has allowed you to, you know, have conversations with people who might, like, I think at one point you were trying to work out what corner this was in Queens, and,
right.
and to be able to engage people and have that conversation. And I think those things are sort of self-perpetuating on Instagram to a sense as well. Okay, LL Cool J. This is one of the first actual sort of pictures that were taken of him as a professional, is that right?
This is his first ever press photo, which I took for Def Jam Records. And I'd just gone with my portfolio into Def Jam, and, you know, this guy, Leo Cohen, who's now the head of Google, just said, oh, I'll find something for you. And one day he just, a few days later, sent this young kid over with a boombox. And, you know, he hadn't done photo sessions before, but he seemed very comfortable, and he did this pose with the boombox, and that was it. And it sort of became an iconic picture. And maybe about 5 years ago, he was on a tour in New York City, and he wanted to use this on his tour t-shirt. So I sold him the rights to use it on the tour t-shirt. And I mean, it's really a beautiful thing. Picture I took of him in '85, he still loves to this day. That's good. And, you know, it's good to maintain contacts and relationships with people.
And again, like, social media has been a great way to do that, and things that you've done in the past that people like LL Cool J have actually shared. And that's, again, because of the kind of nice, gentle, friendly relationship that you have. You know, he wants to use the rights for something, you do charge him, but you're not going to go in at a ridiculously high amount because you already have this relationship. And there's an element of having had the kind of access that we had that perhaps people don't get necessarily as much anymore these days when they're shooting a musician. that's, you know, something that's really worth leveraging through time. A little bit more about some of the hip hop. So, you know, I think from my perspective, again, this kind of consistent aesthetic that you've had, that we see across the more famous people that you've photographed, and also the people who are not so famous, which will show a bit more of that too. So you met with Salt and Pepper very early on in their career.
Yes, they didn't even have a record label or a record. I mean, they were just up and coming. They knew they wanted to make a record. So somehow or another, this British magazine again had heard of them. And, you know, we just spent the day hanging out on the Lower East Side, and it was a beautiful sunny day. And we just walked around and took pictures, and we got very friendly and chatty. And then, you know, they said, well, we're going to put out our first record. Would you like to take the picture? And I was like, sure, I'll do it. And, you know, there was no money. There was no talk of money or assistance or hair or makeup or anything. It was just like, sure, I'll do it. And then this led to me taking this shot of them like about a year later, which became iconic, partly because they're wearing these amazing jackets by this guy, Dapper Dan, who we're going to talk about later, that I ended up getting friendly with because of this actual picture. And so, you know, Salt and Pepper, we've collaborated on things, and we've done things for Life Beat for free with Burton snowboards and so on. And I'm a true believer in collaborating, and without the people, you don't get the portraits. So to me, it's good to, you know, you work with people and and maintain these relationships.
Great. This is another one of your better known music images. It's sort of notorious as well as being famous. Tell us a little about this portrait of Slick Rick. And I think let's just touch briefly on the fact that I do think you're one of these portrait photographers that doesn't overly direct their subject. So you meet with someone, you've probably done your background work on them, you know their music, you know what they're like, they come to the studio, and you really want them to be themselves.
That is correct. I mean, with Slick Rick, you know, he's holding a bottle of champagne. He had drunk the bottle. Well, we had drunk the bottle of champagne. And then, you know, I was ready. I had my lights set up, and I said, step onto my seamless. I don't direct people. I like to try and capture who they think they are rather than who I think they should be. So, you know, he steps onto my set, grabs his crutch, smiles. I took the picture. And this has turned out to be a very iconic picture, but so much so that it was all over the internet, and it has the copyright for this. I have copyrighted this now, but it has been used and abused illegally by various people on T-shirts. Artists have tried to use it and reinterpret it. And, you know, this is a long conversation about who to allow to copyright, who to allow to break your copyright. And
yeah, I mean, obviously, I think a lot of photographers have that very present in their minds. People are nervous about sharing and so on. You know, we could do a whole hour just on that, but Janette is very open to sharing. I'm very open to sharing with the photographers that I represent. There's a little question here on the Q&A that I think we could touch on briefly, which is someone's asking about, you know, you're selling the rights back to LL Cool J for him to use it on a T-shirt. If you don't have the personality rights from LL Cool J, which you don't because you wouldn't have a model release with him, no. Does that mean that you wouldn't be able to use the image in a coffee table book, for example? I think the short answer to that is yes, you can use it in a coffee table book if the book is about your work or if the book is about LL Cool J. What you probably couldn't do is put the picture of LL Cool J on the cover of your book, and your book is about kittens. So there is definitely, it is a commercial use to make a coffee table book, but within reason you're allowed to, within the sort of fine art, free speech, etc. So that would be my short answer on that. You yes. don't have personality rights. And I know that Janette is a big proponent. We heard you, whoever said that. Well, we'll work on that, but I'm not getting sued for it. Yeah. But I think, you know, Janette has made sure that she has what we call a limitation of liability, so that if a third party came along and wanted to do a t-shirt with LL Cool J, they're going to give you the contract that says you indemnify them against anything happening, and you're going to go, nuh-uh, you indemnify me. I only have the copyright. I do not have the personality rights, and that's up to you, the producer of the merchandise, to clear those rights if you feel that you need to.
Right, and that's coming out a lot with my archive right now. And right now I'm working with Ice Cube and Eazy-E, but it's their merch. They've cleared the rights, because otherwise I won't do it. I don't think it's fair either.
Yeah, and I think, you have to remember as business people that every contract that is presented to you by a client is not necessarily a fait accompli. Everything is negotiable. And I always say that's why God invented Sharpies. All right, next slide, please, because this also speaks to this a little bit. We're going to talk just about licensing images on an ongoing basis. So this is a situation where you followed the Go-Go's quite extensively as well,
Right.
and are now, licensing images for a documentary.
Yeah, that's right. I took this picture in, I don't know, 1981 or something, and I'm still friends with Belinda Carlisle. I mean, she's wonderful, and we've stayed friends. But I would never, right now there's a HBO, I think, or Showtime documentary about the Go-Go's, and they came to me and they licensed a bunch of my images, which is great. So, I got paid for shooting things I shot in the 80s, which is always wonderful. And that's the thing about archive.
So we've talked quite a lot about assignment work, and most of the images that we've looked at have been on assignment, whether they've been, a $50 shoot or a $500 shoot, or now we're going to turn a little bit to personal work. Tell us a bit about this.
This is a project I did in 1983. In 1983, and I became very obsessed by this East LA gang that I read about in a local paper when I was in LA. And I spent the summer, somebody introduced me to them. I spent the summer photographing them in 1983. And I could not sell this as a project to anybody. I tried Rolling Stone, The Village Voice, all these British publications. Nobody was interested. And then in 2011, which is a lot later, a bookstore across the street from me, Dashwood, said they would publish a little zine, really. It's a book zine of these images. And it went viral. It was all over the internet. And the amazing thing was, some of the people in the pictures got in touch with me, including those ladies that were in that picture that we were just looking at. And I went to LA. I was having a show. So I met with them, and here they are right now. And it's amazing. They told me that most of the people in this LA gang were in a turf war. Most of the guys are either in jail or dead, but they still survived. They're best friends. One of them works in the DA's office. Another one works in gang rehabilitation, and another one works in human resources. They've done really well. They came to the opening of my exhibition at Heavyweight, which was so great to have an exhibition of these photos I'd taken in LA, all these years later. And these ladies brought their kids, and they were stars. Everybody was photographing them in front of the pictures. And it was a really amazing, heartwarming experience for me. I know they were really happy. Everybody, press was talking to them. And it was a really great thing,
But I think that speaks to how long it took and the patience that you had. The girls were talking about this yesterday afternoon in their program, that, Nikki had got this great idea and she was pitching it around everywhere and no one was interested, but she knew that it was good and she should do it anyway. And then, it really became something important. I think she'd got a grant from that. You waited all of these years of people being disinterested, but also it's another thing about, your subject, you understood the gang situation, you didn't go in there without knowing anything, looking like a rookie, like some photographers just come in to gaze at some fascinating people that, are from a different culture than you. So I think it's important that you're constantly tying that back in. And also, again, your aesthetic. I hope everybody can see the common thread through all of the images. There are some questions coming in. One person's asking about if we could drill down about licensing. We could maybe talk about that a little bit at the end. It's a really nebulous thing. But someone's just said, how have you figured out what to charge over the years? And do you have any guidance? And I'm just going to briefly, because we're only about halfway through the visuals, is to say, know someone on the other side of the table. If Janette doesn't know what to charge, she'll ring me. I know, because I've been doing it for 30 years. We can talk about this at the end, but there's also Getty Images have a fantastic price calculator. So if someone comes to you and says, I want to use this picture for documentary, what do I charge? It will even give you an idea of what sorts of questions you should be asking the client in order to even come up with a fee. Okay, so Oyo Maravilla, continuation of personal work. Slide, please, gents. Thank you. So, Janette, from my perspective, doesn't ever sit still. I sometimes beg her to say no to things. She doesn't, but I'm often surprised about what comes about from the things that she will do. I do think it's important to know when to say no, but it's also important to know when to take an opportunity because of a contact that you may make. So tell us a little bit more about, your street photography, which I think is a bit less sort of street than some people might imagine when we talk about street.
Right. Well, I would say I did a huge project in the 90s, photographing people on the street in New York. And at that point, I was photographing a lot of celebrities, like sports people and, politicians and actors. And I really was missing the street. So I just decided when I wasn't actually on a photo shoot for money that I would go just take my camera, jump on the train and go to different neighborhoods and walk around and ask people. And I always ask people, this is two brothers I photographed at the Puerto Rican Day Parade. And I really love this picture. And I started running them in something called the workbook, which Julie knows well. You could take out it's like a paid ad. I don't know, it's like $1,000 or something to put this picture in with my name. And this led to, next slide, please. I had also photographed these two guys shooting hoops in my neighborhood. And because I put these pictures in this workbook, I got an assignment from a British advertising agency to do an ad for potato chips. And they wanted like real New York people. So I got to cast people that I had met on the street. And I cast these two guys, they got paid. We shot a whole bunch of pictures, they got paid in cash. And it was really amazing, what this has led to. There was a homeless guy when we were on the shoot, I remember, in his wheelchair, and they were there with their cameras and everything. And we cast him, we paid him $100 in cash, which he was pretty grateful for. I photographed him and he sang New York, New York to the camera, and it became part of the campaign. I mean, it was really incredible. So, I love being on the street and being open to everything. This is another thing I shot. I also am a big believer in doing things for free. For myself, it works really well. And I was the New York editor of a very beautiful British magazine called Jocks and Nerds, who they just emailed me randomly asking if I wanted to do a shoot for them. And I said yes, and I ended up doing all these shoots. Met these guys, the Go Hard Boys, they're a Harlem bike club. I wanted to document them. And you cannot find outlets for work like this, paid outlets normally. So I went and documented them many times. And this ran, it was like a 12-page spread in a magazine, really beautifully printed. And it made me really happy. It made them really happy. And years later, it's just part of my body of work.
So there is the exchange of access, content, creating for your archive, and working for free.
Right.
I do wonder, I think you probably worked for little earlier on in your career. I do think
Correct.
It's probably a bit more of a challenge for photographers who are just starting out, because there is an overarching expectation that most of what you do will be free. Even I get, communications from movie companies that are actually asking for very famous images and they don't expect to pay for anything. In that situation, you're going to say no because it doesn't really do much for you. But when someone like Jocks and Nerds comes along and you know that it's going to be this beautiful publication and you're going to have access to people like the Go Hard Boys, and then again, you're shooting them in the same aesthetic, people are dropping in questions about keys to your success. Perhaps we can talk a little bit more about that, and we're going to finish with some pointers, but it's about consistency, availability, being prepared, knowing what you're doing, and actually having the balls to just get out there and do it.
Right, and following your passions to make, I hate to use this word brand, but in a way you are branding yourself. Like I am sort of branded as a sort of documentary street portrait photographer. So that has led to we're getting to them, a couple of incredible assignments. And I think it's important to know that you're willing to go out there and shoot on the street if that's what you want to do.
But you have to also communicate your work to past clients, present clients, and future clients. So over the years, you and I actually work together doing newsletters every quarter.
Right.
We pick things that are particularly interesting, and we very gently communicate by sending a newsletter that's, not too high res. You also, yesterday Tracy was talking about how open she is to being communicated with from the perspective of a curator. If you're not going to stay in touch with me, you're going to fall off my radar. And it's
right.
as simple as that. And I don't think anyone should overthink how worried they are about whether they're bothering me, because if they're bothering me, I'm going to ignore it. And it's up to you to then not take that personally and send me another newsletter in 3 months' time, or more of a targeted email marketing. But you also do things like zines, and something like a inexpensive, not everything you do has to be a blurb book that costs you $40, $50. You can make a zine for a couple of dollars.
Right.
And then you have this additionally branded item. And then people see that, and then they want to produce that themselves. So, there's no one answer to success. There wasn't when you first started. There isn't now. There's an awful lot of underpinnings that I think that go on to having this photography career. Slide, please.
Yeah, this is another thing I shot for Jocks and Nerds. It was a rockabilly festival in Las Vegas. And there was a car show, and these guys looked amazing. They're right in my wheelhouse. They're tattooed. They look incredible. They've got attitude. I love the cars. And this just all speaks to the whole thing, my love of music and branding. And as Julie said, I think the important thing is to keep in touch with people. If it's by Instagram, or you make a little zine and you just pop one in the mail, make a small one that fits in a small envelope and just send it to somebody, a past client. It's just a kind of, hey, I'm still here reminder. And people are very happy to get these little gifts. Don't forget to sign them to the person. That's always an extra thing. I think there's, these little giveaways are reminders. And, we used to have business cards. Well, I still have business cards with images on them. People like those. Just, they can put them up on their pin boards or whatever. I just think you have to keep reminding people that you're still shooting.
Definitely. And also you keep differentiating yourself. So back in the day, when you were taking your portfolio around, most photographers had a plain black leather-bound portfolio and their name embossed on the front. You had some, bright yellow thing. Lots of photographers now have a plain, very straightforward website. You took yours a step further. You branded your website. You thought very carefully about categorizing your website, and you spent a really good, long time really thinking it through. What do I want my website to do for me? What do I want people to experience while they're here? And the best way to make your images shine so that your website isn't actually what people are seeing. They're seeing the work. They can get a quick overview if they're not familiar with you. If they are familiar with you and they want to drill down, everything is really transparent and it's right there. So yes, business cards with pictures on, postcards with pictures on. People will maybe get back to their offices at some point. We are now missing the kind of, analog thing. But again, most of us on this side of the table are very open to just being dropped a line every now and then, shot a little message, email, even phone call. You ring people up these days and they're so surprised someone's calling that they want to actually pick up. So don't be shy about coming forward and being confident about who you are and what you do. Okay, let's keep moving. Slide, please. Personal work has been a constant feature. Just very briefly, tell us about this.
I did a shoot for Glamour magazine about these women that were running a single room occupancy hotel in Times Square. And there were these amazing women. We did a photo shoot. And while I was there, I saw the most incredible looking people coming in and out of this place. And I asked them if I could go. At the time, I was obsessed with a 4x5 camera and set up in their lobby. And they said, okay. And they put a sign up, you know, a photographer will be here next Tuesday. And I set up and we made portraits and we were giving everybody Polaroids that they could keep. And it was incredible. I photographed this guy, Tony Tonius. I mean, you couldn't, I don't know. To me, he's just such a beautiful looking guy. You can't find people like that. And this was just one of maybe 100 portraits I did that day. And it was so great because a lot of these people had not been photographed in 20 years. You know, they're homeless people or people who have like drug issues or whatever. And they were sending the pictures back to their families. It was, you know, it was just a gift I wanted to give them. And they gave me back this amazing gift of portraits.
And I like the fact that you'd actually gone there on assignment and then you turned that into a personal project.
Right.
And we'll talk a little bit about turning the personal projects into assignments, but I love the way that you took that twist on this one. So let's talk a little bit about collaboration. Every collaboration that you do with someone else doubles your audience. Start collaborating with lots of other people and you're increasing your audience exponentially. Tell us just about this particular project.
This is a project that was actually started by the artist called Say Adams, and he had the idea of having his graffiti friends draw on my photos. And we had a little exhibition in my studio here. 500 people turned up. It was a hot summer's day. And there were just 10 artists. And it was a passion project for everybody. Nobody got paid, and people just were allowed to pick something from my archive and draw on it, reinterpret it. And sooner or later, I was showing this. I started traveling these little prints, 11 by 14 prints of it. We went to Geneva and Paris and Rome, London, Bologna, and it turned into a book. And sooner or later, we had 30 artists, and it became a book, and it became an exhibition. I got signed to a gallery, a very good gallery. And the wonderful Photoville did this amazing, I think, 18-foot high or maybe more. Maybe it was even taller than that. Beautiful mashup at their festival, and people were posing in front of it. I mean, it was incredible. It was painted by Say Adams and Queen Andrea. It's just turned into this amazing project. And as Julie says, so now I have 30 different artists talking about my work, and then they're talking to their friends. And it's a great way. I'm a big sharer. I think it's really good to share work. And, you know, this particular project, you know, had everything: community, passion, creativity, music, art. It was a huge collision. And for me, it was wonderful. We did talks, we did workshops with kids where I printed out my photos and had kids drawing all over them, doing their own mashups. Everybody from the age of 2 to 60, 70-year-old people. Just, you know, make it fun.
But this is not, you know, this Photoville opportunity came about because you've been going to Photoville every year, because you'd already done stuff with them. I think it's important to have a presence. We'll talk a bit more about galleries. You touched on it there. It's been a long road to have good gallery representation. It's not something that most people find very easy to come about, and lots of photographers want, and is not necessarily realistic for lots of photographers. Again, it's been a question of just building up your reputation, building up such a solid amount of work that would lead to signing with a gallery. Let's put that to the back burner just very briefly. We are going to have to step it up a bit because it's going really, really quickly, and we haven't got too much time left. I do want to talk a little bit more about some of the commercial things that you've done. Okay, slide. So here we just see a situation where an art director has seen what you've done in the past and has come to you and said, you know, we want you to shoot Kangol. We want you to shoot it in the style that you were photographing. when you were shooting bands in the 80s on the streets of London. I think for some art directors, it's a no-brainer. They can look back through your archive and get a real sense of what they're going to get if they hire you for a gig. More about collaboration, really. Jose James is a young man who you met very early on in his career. And
on a free photo shoot for Jocks and Nerds.
Right, free photo shoot for Jocks and Nerds, became friends, and you've basically followed his career. If anybody wanted pictures of Jose James for an article, there's not going to be that much work, but isn't Janette's? You know, again, it's about collaborating with people. And just, I found myself saying this at a portfolio review last couple of years ago, you know, it really helps to be nice. And the man looked at me like I was crazy, but it really does help to be nice.
Well, can I just say, Jose James and I are really good friends by this Blue Note, for which I did get paid, and many other shoots for him, which I did get paid. And he has a record label now, and it's, I'm part of the team. So I shoot all the artists on the record label. So, you know, just from this one little shoot has grown all these amazing things. So.
Somebody's just asking, I'll touch on this just because it's here. Who owns the rights to the collaborations between you and the artist, so that when you sell something, how do you share the profits?
That is a really good question. So we make prints of these, and if they sell, I split 50-50 with the artist. So, you know, if somebody wants the Futura one, Futura gets 50% of what I get, and that's just how it works. And, you know, nobody got paid for doing the book. It was a labor of love, but it's a beautiful, find it on Amazon. Yeah, okay, we're just great. We're sharing.
Okay, slide, please. So we're just going to touch briefly on the idea of the personal work transitioning into the commercial work. And I think this is a good example.
Right, this was another shoot for Jocks and Nerds about Detroit and how it was coming back. And I went and shot all these different people in Detroit, you know, being Detroit proud, which they really were. And we were shooting musicians. And we also shot this guy who was the creative director of a company called Shinola, which I was talking to him, and I gave him my business card, which happened to have a picture of Debbie Harry on it. And he was like, I love this. Can I buy this print? So I ended up selling him a giant print of Debbie Harry, and then also a print of Belinda Carlisle from the Go-Go's, which he was actually at the concert years ago. And then he said to me, do you want to come to Detroit and shoot a campaign for us? And I ended up shooting all the workers who make the watches. And this was a big billboard in LA, and it was an amazing job. And, you know, with my relationship with Jose, I was like, he would look good in a watch. So they ended up using him to model the watches. He did concerts in their flagship stores, and he got paid for doing it. I got paid for doing it. It was a win-win situation. This is part of a project I did for an Italian shoe company called Fiorentini & Baker. And we had this idea to shoot creatives of all sorts. So it's all sorts of people wearing their boots. And this is Jules Mock from the Mashup Project. She did the LL Cool J one, wearing these boots in LA. This is an amazing, and here is, well, there's Say Adams in the middle. DJ Misbehavior, who actually introduced me to Fiorentini & Baker, and then a great musician. You know, we just had a lot of fun with this, and I went to shoot in Italy and LA and all.
Sorry, we lost you there for a sec. All right, I want to talk about this particular photo shoot because I'm so fascinated, because it was like the biggest production I think you've ever been on, right?
Sure, absolutely. This is a photo shoot I did. It's actually the worldwide campaign for Levi's. And I got this job, I mean, dream job. I'm a huge fan of Levi's. This guy, Chad Hinson, is the most amazing man, and he's a huge music fan. And he was a big fan of hip hop and my hip hop photos, but he was also a fan of the work that I was doing on the street, like the things like the Go Hard Boys and so forth. So I got this job, which was a dream job, there was a crew of about 100 people, and we were doing, we were shooting, we had models. It was a 3-day shoot. We threw block parties in Bedford-Stuyvesant and Jersey City. And we were also casting people that we found on the street and paying them. And it was just, I would say it was my dream job. Here are some kids in Jersey City who just turned up. They lived in these buildings and they were like, what's going on here? Because we had this huge crew and we were shooting. And, you know, they're amazing. They all got paid. We threw them in, you know, put them each in a little Levi's t-shirt. We actually ended up opening that fire hydrant. It was a hot summer's day and they're all running around screaming in the water and having a great time. And it's a great shot. And because they're not models, you get this amazing energy. And the kid carrying a boombox had such a great time that he ended up becoming a model, and he now models for Gap and Ralph Lauren, which I just found out recently, which is really great. We were in Bed-Stuy. I wanted to shoot in this beautiful old barber shop. And so we just kind of walked in there and said, is it okay? They said yes. And I got this shot, which, you know, here are the people from Skate Kitchen, which is a movie and a TV series right now. We were shooting them, and I was shooting them skateboarding, you know.
I've got a great question here, JB.
Okay.
Have you found yourself starstruck at any point? And what do you do to remain focused and calm on set?
That is a really good question. You know, I have been starstruck at certain times, and it's very hard because I just have to kind of block that off and try and remember that I'm here to do a job. I'm photographing somebody who's maybe really famous, or I'm working on a shoot for Dior, for instance, which maybe was my most starstruck moment. And it was intimidating. I mean, I think Julie's going to pull up this Dior picture any minute now. Is it coming?
Please. Yep.
Oh, well.
Here we go.
Well, this is actually...
oh, that's Gucci.
This is Dapper Dan. Remember the salt and pepper jackets? This is the collection that the guy who made those salt and pepper jackets in 1987, he, a couple of years ago, did a collaboration with Gucci. And I was the first person to shoot it because probably of the salt and pepper picture, because they knew I have this street sensibility. And we shot this in Harlem. It was an amazing shoot, and it was a slightly rainy day. You know, sometimes I'm intimidated. That Levi shoot, it's not exactly starstruck, but it was intimidating in the fact that I was, you know, in a church talking about the shoot with the Levi's people. There were 100 people in there, and their creative director is talking to everybody, and he said, and this is Janette, and she's going to do the hero shots. And I realized all these people were there for me, and if I messed up, it wasn't going to be good.
But this is great that you're even thinking this, you know, this far down in your career and all of these crazy situations that you've been in. I mean, I've seen you shoot a lock-in women's boxing thing in like Brownsville, you know, without even sort of batting an eyelid. So to think that you're like a bit nervous about shooting Gucci and Dior, to me is absolutely wonderful. Let's move on to Dior. We're at 5-4. So there's a couple questions we might come to at the end. Everyone, please do feel free to keep asking questions. We will have some time at the end for a Q&A.
Yeah, I think we can, if we run over a few minutes.
I mean, I do just want to say, you know, you're leveraging all this amazing work that you got over the years. That's not something that a new photographer can recreate. But, you know, we'll give some advice at the end. And I think someone's asking about advice to, you know, someone who's leaving college and wants to start photography as their full-time career, because we rode through some of the better times, I think, of photography. It was a little bit more of a healthier industry. There seemed to be a bit more pie for everybody. Anyone that wanted to go shoot a gig could get an opportunity to do that at the local paper or local magazines and so on.
You can probably still do that now, though. And I advise people to do it. And I advise people to do work, unpaid work. And, you know, if you're shooting a band, an unknown band, they could be famous in, you know, a year's time. And not only that, but give the band some pictures, share. you know, and then they're going to call you when they get famous to do their album cover. And that's how, you know, that's how it works. And that Dior shoot I got pretty much directly because of pictures like that mod girl that we were looking at earlier on. She loved my punk pictures, and she's a real feminist. She loves working with women.
So let's go to that fabulous Dior slide.
Yeah, I was to shoot for Maria Grazia. It was her first collection. And she asked me, how do you want to shoot this? I thought she was going to tell me, but she asked me. And it came to me, I said, I'm going to shoot it like I'm shooting a band backstage, everything. So the people making the clothes, the models on the go-sees, you know, the hair, the makeup, the celebrities, the hoopla. And I did that. I worked 12, 13, 14-hour days, just documenting everything for a week. And nobody said anything. Nobody came up the very last day. The press, the head of press came up and said, Janette, I love everything you've done. And that was it. I mean, that made me really happy. But, you know, then she asked me to do a shoot a couple of years later, shooting her incredible collection on the same streets where I shot these punk bands. And I walked into the studio where we were gathering, and the whole mood board on the wall was my photos from the punk era. So she was inspired by that, and that inspired me. Okay, here's something, a pro bono project to get out the vote. We traveled across America, setting up in the Greyhound bus station or wherever, and doing portraits of people and registering people to vote, partnering with local people. It's a passion project, but you know, you can change the world with things like this. And we were doing billboards and bus, you know, they were on the side of buses. And in Photoville as well, I have to say.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Everybody should know about Photoville. If they don't, find out right now. Well, after our presentation. So obviously during the last year, it's been a little bit harder to photograph. Certainly haven't had that many assignments.
No.
But you being you haven't really sat still that much. I love what you've done on the streets with the protests and the demos. It's right up your alley. It's something that you've always done. You're right there in the city. What I love about this work, however, is all these things that we've talked about, all these relationships that we've been discussing have led to, I mean, and everyone's been, not everybody, but lots of people have been photographing protests. Lots of people have been out on the street doing this. Not everything that I see necessarily has a point of focus or even necessarily a clear message or is even necessarily framed that well. You do all those things consistently well within your own aesthetic and your ethos. But for all the stuff that has gone on in the last year, not that many people actually were able to then have a show. But you were able. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about?
It's another Photoville thing. Dave Shelley from Photoville called me and said, would I like to show my work on the side of a giant building called St. Anne's Warehouse? And because we can't do shows inside, it's COVID safe. It was outside projection. And it was amazing. You can see the scale. I mean, it really was an incredible thing. And, you know, I was so gratified to be able to show the work. And I think when you're photographing demonstrations and big concerts, it's good to try and focus on one person, and you've got to be looking the whole time. You can't just be taking mass crowd pictures. You want to try and get a feeling of the passion of individual people who are there, and that's always been my thing. So, I mean, that's my hint as far as if you're going to be out in a crowd, try and pick out individual people and see if you can capture what they're thinking.
And just, again, think about what it is that it's you that gets the show on the outside of St. Anne's Warehouse and all the things that we've talked about that have led up to being available and accessible and knowing all the people who are involved already. Someone's asking about if you start working with someone or working on a project for free, how would you then transition that into a paid project? And beyond that, people are asking about what sort of language, are there any tried and true phrases that you can share that you use when you're discussing how you expect to be compensated for something?
Well, it's a difficult issue. If you start working, and your friends, if the person gets really famous, then you can say, well, okay, now you're famous. Let's see, what am I going to get paid for you using this picture? And I think that's a very fair ask. And, just be straight up. I mean, it's, as far as pricing things, well, Julie knows it can be anything from, $100 to, $20,000. It depends what it is. It's really dependent. And I think Julie's advice about Getty was a good thing. And people have been coming to me a lot saying, we're a small independent, blah, 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 fill in the dots. We'd like to use your stuff for free. I think you have to put your foot down at a certain point. When somebody's being paid to ask you, I don't know if you should be letting them.
I think that is such a good point. It happens all of the time.
Right.
You get a begging email from a design firm who are, people bandy the term non-profit around a lot. Non-profit doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have any money.
No.
We're not necessarily. You need to know when to say yes and you need to know when to say no. And just to speak further to the point about knowing what to charge, you also need to know what to ask. So if Jose James comes along and says, I want to do an album cover, is it just the album cover? Is it going to be press? Is it going to be t-shirts? Right. Is it going to be this, that, and the other? And just ensuring that, even if you bundle up and make it a really nice deal, at least you know what it is that you're giving them. And if you don't know, ask someone for help.
Mm-hmm.
What's your day rate? Well, what's their day rate? What do you charge? You shoot bands. What do you charge for that? What rights are you giving when you hand over those images? You should be using language that says, I'm giving you these images. You can use them on your website and your Instagram.
Providing you give me photo credit and link to my Instagram.
Right.
I think that's, exactly. If you're doing things for free, you need to get credit because you need to drive the traffic to you.
Exactly. It's a difficult thing. I hate the word exposure. People die from exposure. It doesn't put food on your table. But again, be part of a community. Janette is consistently part of a community. I'm consistently part of the community. If you don't know someone like me, there are groups on Facebook where you can go and ask. I don't know what a mug release looks like. I don't know what a limitation of liability. What's a personality right? What am I giving away when somebody's asking this of me? Just try and be informed. Okay, we're going to step it up. It's 4 o'clock already. Slides, please. It's taken a long time to get to Fahey Klein Gallery. Janette is now represented by one of the most important galleries in the States. They did come to her, but it was a culmination of all the wonderful things that she's doing. And this, to me, this image here is one of the highlights of your career. So just quickly tell us a little bit about why this is important.
This is a picture I took from Melody Maker of this group, the Marine Girls. They didn't get very big, but the National Portrait Gallery in London, which is a very important gallery, has just acquired this for their permanent collection because they want to be more gender and sensitive. So it's kind of a great thing. And also because they decided they like my work finally.
And how did that come about? After quite some time, lots of British photographers are in that collection. What do you think it was that changed, that they reached out to you finally to acquire your work?
Actually, the Fahey Klein Gallery had been pitching me a couple of years ago. So I think finally, they got a little bit of money and they just decided now's the time. And I have to say, probably, Black Lives Matter and #MeToo has all had something to do with it. People are getting more aware, which is a wonderful thing.
Just trying to be proactively inclusive of, non-white men persons.
Right, exactly.
And this is another image that was acquired, the specials.
Right.
Okay, great. And here we have, was this your first show with Fahey Klein? So let's talk about galleries for a little bit. I always say to photographers, be careful what you ask for. Actually putting together a show can be really expensive. You're probably going to make the prints and oftentimes you're going to make the frames, pay for the frames. How did you find the process of, was it a collaboration with Fahey Klein that you decided what the work would be, or did they know what they wanted to show? Tell us just a little bit about that.
I think it was a collaboration, and they definitely knew what they wanted to show. And they also published the mashup book to go with the show. So that was definitely going to be part of the show. And, you know, they paid for the framing, I paid for the prints, and it was a great show. This was 2018, and it was a great show, and they're still selling work from this show. So I have no complaints. They represent me worldwide, which is not something I was used to. But the thing about them, as opposed to other galleries, is they're the artist rather than just trying to sell specific photos, which is a huge thing for me. And they've also gotten me commercial work with clients like Apple, for instance. So, you know, I'm very grateful to them. And, well, Julie, okay. So this was something I did with the Museum of the City of New York, which was brilliant. They wanted to acquire some of my street portrait pictures for their collection. They came over and they were like, actually, we're doing this hip hop show. Do you want to be part of it? So this was an amazing show. It got extended. It was so popular. And I got to show work with a couple of my favorite photographers who are also friends from the hip hop community, Martha Cooper and Joe Conzo. And it was just a great show. We got a lot of press. We were on TV. It was brilliant.
And then Contact High, which was also really good value, which was a book based on sort of contact sheets, amazing music. If anyone hasn't seen it, you should totally look for it.
Right.
And that show has now traveled. So the work's been in the Far East, Middle East.
Hip hop contact sheets. And the woman who put this together, Vicky Toback, is an amazing woman. She's a friend now. And yeah, I was in LA for the opening of the show in LA. This is now in Abu Dhabi. We should have been there, but pandemic has stopped the travel. But yeah, I mean, that's been an amazing collaboration too. And I think it's important to be open. And one thing I wanted to say was about giving work to people. Everybody's asking for something, but I think for me, it's important to give back. And if it's a charity, I'm very happy to donate something. And that is the difference. Giving something to a small independent documentary, that's up to you. But I think it's, you know, somebody, you know, comes knocking on your door like God's Love We Deliver, or, you know, the Southern Poverty Law Center. You know, it doesn't do any harm to give a print.
Great. All right, slides. We'll just do the last couple of slides.
Right. And this is those same basketball guys that I shot that led to the potato chip thing. And here they are at the Museum of the City of New York right now. They acquired this photo and they used it on the back cover of a book they were doing about basketball. So, you know, things that you do for nothing can lead to amazing opportunities. And I really believe people should be open.
And just to clarify this, you photographed these guys and then you went back to find them when you had the opportunity to license the photograph so that you could get a model release. You paid them something, they signed a release, is that right?
Yeah, they signed a release. Well, I photographed them as a street portrait. Then I went back to find them and asked them if they wanted to be in this ad. We did more pictures. They signed a release from the advertising agency. They got paid. And now this picture is in a museum. So to me, yeah.
I'm going to just do a last couple of questions. I'm going to answer the first one, which is, in the digital age, is the traditional portfolio book with print still needed? It depends if you have the opportunity to show your work as prints. And if you are invested in maybe one day having a gallery, then you do need to be able to have a book of prints. We used to have these sort of plastic sleeves and you drop your book around at various places. Those days are over. So I would say, no, you don't. You need a well-curated website. You need a well-curated Instagram. And if the opportunity comes along to go to a live portfolio review in person, then you should have a set of really beautiful prints of, 11 by 14 or 12 by 16. Otherwise, no. Janette, can you give us, the question here is, looking back, what lessons about the business of photography can you share? So beyond what we've discussed.
Well, I just think it's really important just in general in life, to work hard, be kind, be respectful, maintain contacts with people. I mean, I think that's pretty much it. And also, you know, if you have a personal project that you're very passionate about, don't let people derail you. Do it, and it will just become a part of your body of work. And, you know, you can just show it. And one day someone will come along and make a book out of it, probably.
What's the best advice you've ever been given?
The best advice I've ever been given. Wow, that's a hard one. Oh, I think the best advice I've ever been given is don't be afraid to ask, because what's the worst someone can say is no. So if you know, you're pitching something to somebody, don't be afraid to say, look, what do you think about this? They might say it's not for them, but don't be, you know, I think it's important. If you believe in something, just don't be afraid to ask.
And with that, we'll give you our last minute takeaways. So my top tip for the audience is get help, be informed, and keep in mind that running a photography business is like 80% doing businessy stuff and 20% actually shooting. Janette, your takeaway.
That's probably right. Well, I just think follow your passion. You know, as I say, work hard, be kind. I think that that's it.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for coming and listening to us. I hope it's helpful. You know, we're on Instagram. Reach out if you have questions.
Totally. Yeah, we're available.
Yep. I don't know if you guys post our Instagrams on the chat, but feel free. Yeah, if you have a question, don't be afraid to reach out, just as I'm saying.
Absolutely. Me too.
Thank you, Julie and Janette, for joining us and for that incredible session. I'd also like to thank our speakers and reviewers from our previous programs for sharing their knowledge and insight with us. And I hope everyone's feeling inspired and will join us for future sessions, which you can learn more about on our website and by following us on social media at Leica Camera USA. Until then, see you next time.